Hello everyone, welcome to Eye on Africa. Here are your headlines on this Friday. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights says acts of violence that have left hundreds dead and more than 500,000 displaced in the Democratic Republic of Congo may constitute crimes against humanity. Michel Djotodia is back in the Central African Republic. The former rebel leader and president says he is no longer a man of war. And Kenyan authorities are raising the alarm over the influx of desert locusts across the country. We'll tell you how the government's call for help has spread across Twitter, but not for the reasons they'd hoped. But first, a UN report published this Friday says that killings, rapes, and other forms of violence targeting the Hema community in the Democratic Republic of Congo may amount to crimes against humanity. According to that report, more than 700 people have been killed in Ituri province in the past 2 years. Laurent Berthecher has this report.
A damning report on the ongoing ethnic conflict in northeastern DRC. The United Nations say the violence against Hema communities in Ituri province could amount to crimes against humanity.
The barbarity that characterizes these attacks, including the beheading of women and children with machetes, the dismemberment and removal of body parts of the victims as trophies of war, reflects the desire of the attackers to inflict lasting trauma on the Hema communities. The violence could contain some elements of crimes against humanity through murder, torture, rape, and other forms of sexual violence.
Since December 2017, attacks against the Hema community have multiplied and gained in intensity. According to the UN, they've been mostly carried out by the Lendu, a rival ethnic group that's long been in conflict with the Hema over grazing rights and land. The report says army and police deployment in the area in 2018 failed to stop the violence, and even accuses security forces of carrying out arbitrary arrests and executions. The United Nations also warned the Lendu have become more organized in recent years, orchestrating coordinated attacks on up to 11 villages on the same day. It's not the first time Ituri province has been plunged in a bloody conflict opposing the Hema and the Lendu. Between 2002 and 2003, around 8,000 civilians were killed and over 500,000 displaced by ethnic clashes between the two groups.
All right, joining us live from Geneva is Rupert Colville. You heard some of what he had to say in that report. He is the spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Mr. Colville, thank you for being with us tonight. The report released today explains that for about a year there was a lot of random violence, but that it wasn't until September of 2018 that Lendu armed groups became increasingly organized when it came to carrying out attacks. What was behind that shift, and how did it lead to any changes on the ground?
Well, in some ways, the shift happened earlier. There's really been three phases. So the first phase, which was December 2017 to May 2018, it was more like a normal, if you like, interethnic violence between two groups. Then the second phase was very much the Lendu targeting the military, targeting the Congolese army. During that, they overran, sort of isolated outposts and so on, and they gathered arms. But you already saw the signs of much more organized, synchronized, simultaneous attacks and so on during that second phase. Then the third phase, which began in June last year, 2019, is really the worst phase, and they're back targeting the Hema, the other group, massively, and really horrendous attacks, and using firearms this time, whereas first time round it was more machetes and knives and so on.
I want to read to our viewers a quick quote from that report. It says, "The barbarity that characterizes these attacks reflects the desire of the attackers to inflict lasting trauma to the Hema communities." That wording is, that vocabulary is very similar to the UN Convention on Genocide. What's stopping the UNHCHR from characterizing this as a genocide? What more would it take?
Well, what we're saying in this report is very probably this is now an armed group. It's not just sort of casual violence between two ethnic groups, but an organized armed group. And that means it could be guilty of war crimes, crimes against humanity. Now, genocide, the report does very briefly touch on that, and it says there are some elements that could be sort of veering towards genocide. But the burden of proof of genocide is so difficult crimes against humanity are some of the worst crimes on the planet. In order to qualify that, you have to be systematic and widespread. So, strong element of organization, intention, and so on. That we think there may well be, and so I think it's a safer characterization to say it could well be crimes against humanity, that they're seeking to completely eradicate the Hema from particular parts of Turi province.
The report also mentions that security forces which had been deployed to stop the violence have not only failed to do so, but they've also taken part in extrajudicial executions, sexual violence, and arbitrary arrests. How widespread is this?
Well, it is a big problem. I mean, the investigators who put together this report, they've catalogued more than 100 incidents involving violations involving the FARDC. And these include 27 extrajudicial executions, 41 incidents of sexual violence, including rape, and also theft and forced labor and so on. That said, one should recognize the FARDC themselves were the victims of really vicious attacks during 2018, when these Lendu armed groups really focused on the army themselves. And they suffered a lot of casualties. More than 70 soldiers were killed during that period. So you're seeing retaliation. You're seeing retaliation by the FARDC against the Lendu, and obviously that should stop. But one should recognize also that they've been under a lot of pressure.
Okay. All right. Rupert Colville, spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have, but thank you very much for that information and analysis. Next, Michel Djotodia, the former rebel leader and president of the Central African Republic, has returned to Bangui. It comes exactly 6 years after quitting as head of state after mounting pressure from the international community. His rebel movement, known as the Seleka, plunged the country into violence in 2013. Djotodia was welcomed at a Bangui hotel by about 30 supporters. He told journalists he was no longer a man of war. Take a listen.
There is a peace agreement that has been signed. So now it is time for all of us, the fighters and everyone, for all Central Africans to come together, to stand up and to bring peace to the country. There is a time for war and there is a time for peace. Now is the time for peace. 2020 must be a year of peace for the Central African people.
The ruling party in Lesotho has asked Prime Minister Thomas Tabane to resign over allegations he may be linked to the 2017 murder of his wife. The country's police chief has accused the Prime Minister of being involved in the killing of Lipolelo Tabane 2 days before he was inaugurated. The couple had been embroiled in bitter divorce proceedings. At a press conference, the deputy leader of the All Basotho Convention Party, or ABC, told reporters that it was, quote, obvious that the Prime Minister was a suspect in a horrendous criminal matter. He went on to say that Tabane had become a threat to the nation. U.S. President Donald Trump has raised a few eyebrows after suggesting he actually deserved to win the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize, which was actually awarded to Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. The comments were made at a rally in Ohio Thursday night. Let's take a listen.
The Nobel Peace Prize. I'll tell you about that. I made a deal. I saved a country. And I just heard that the head of that country is now getting the Nobel Peace Prize for saving the country. I said, did I have something to do with it? Yeah, but that's the way it is. As long as we know, that's all that matters. I saved a big war, saved a couple of them.
Well, his claims that he took part in the brokering of the peace accord in the country are not entirely true. The U.S. had actually a minimal role in the peace talks. Instead, several Gulf countries were key in helping bring the two parties together. Trump has said he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize for other reasons in the past, including for convincing North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to give up nuclear weapons. Finally, millions of desert locusts are spreading through Kenya and posing a significant threat to food security. That is according to the country's agriculture minister. Kenya is not the only country to be affected. Swarms of locusts have wreaked havoc in Somalia and Ethiopia, leading to the Food and Agriculture Organization to call it the worst situation in 25 years in the Horn of Africa. The insects, which can travel up to 130 kilometers per day, began spreading in Somalia and Ethiopia last month, infesting some 70,000 hectares of land. Authorities in Kenya say the government has obtained pesticides and 2 aircraft to spray affected areas. Well, the country's agriculture minister has called for help from the public, asking people to post pictures to social media of what they suspect could be locusts. That is because officials say several locust spottings were in fact just grasshoppers, which are not harmful. That in turn has led to Kenyans posting pictures mocking the initiative, with posts asking whether a variety of animals and creatures are actually locusts. Well, we did some thorough investigative work here at France 24, and we can confirm that those are definitely not locusts. That wraps up this edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching. More news coming up in just a moment.
En France 24 nos esforzamos por brindar la mejor información hecha por periodistas de Latinoamérica y del resto del mundo.
We look at how technology is shaping the future, and we show you the latest gadgets you can soon get your hands on.
نقدم لكم الاقتصاد بطريقة مختلفة، نبسط المفاهيم والمصطلحات كي تكتمل الصورة لديكم.
Aquí puedo hablar de medio ambiente, no solo de los problemas que afectan a nuestro planeta, sino también de iniciativas y soluciones que a veces no tienen espacio en televisión.
La différence sur France 24, c'est l'idée du reportage. Nos grands reportages, vous ne les verrez nulle part ailleurs.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.